This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that allows you to make a professional-looking website regardless of your experience. What's up guys, my name is Mark, and in this video, we're going to be ranking the top 10 starting fives in NBA history. Now, as you can imagine, there is a correlation between the best starting fives in NBA history and the best overall teams in NBA history. But the two things aren't exactly the same, right? Because a team also has a bench and a coaching staff, and there's other factors that people take into consideration. Since we're only ranking the starting lineup, winning the championship isn't actually going to be a qualifier to be on this list. Although, as you'll see, winning is still very important. And then one last thing before we go, I intentionally avoided duplicating teams of the same dynasty, right? So I didn't want this top 10 list to just be like 96 Bulls, 97 Bulls, 98 Bulls, right? That's gonna be boring because, you know, who wants to watch a video like that? All right, let's get into it. At number 10, the 1970 Los Angeles Lakers. Now, on face value, this starting lineup has the talent to be considered for the greatest starting five of all time. Jerry West, scoring champion, arguably the best player in the NBA at that time. Will Chamberlain, 33 years old, still a beast. You had Elgin Baylor, who was 35 years old, definitely past his prime, but still put up big time numbers. Happy Hairston, who had the best year of his career, averaging 20 points per game, and then Dick Garrett to round it out. There are three reasons why I rank this lineup lower than it might seem like it should be. Reason number one is because this team didn't win the finals. They lost in the 1970 NBA Finals to the New York Knicks because Willis Reed basically turned into Wolverine in Game 7. Reason number two, while the stats you see are indeed impressive, they are very inflated. This was the 1970s. Pace was high. These guys were all playing 40 plus minutes per game. As you'll see for the rest of this video, while I do put the stats up on the screen just to give you an idea of what each player was contributing that year, you can't really compare some of these numbers to like the numbers from the 90s or the 2000s. And then finally, reason number three as to why this team isn't ranked as high as it should be is because, again, it was the 1970s. This was one of the least competitive eras in NBA history because this was right after Bill Russell retired, and this was before the NBA-ABA merger. But still, this was a baller starting lineup. Moving on to number 9, the 2004 Detroit Pistons. Chauncey Billups, a combo guard with a great jump shot and a knack for big games. His backcourt mate, Richard Hamilton, who was deadly from mid-range and always a problem coming off screens. A 23-year-old Tayshaun Prince, hyper-athletic, great defender, and well-rounded player. Rasheed Wallace, who they traded for mid-season. In general, a very underrated player who could score from anywhere on the court and was really the Pistons' best one-on-one offensive player. Ben Wallace, who was the best defensive player in the league at that time. And I say that with confidence because in the 5 years between 2002 and 2006, he won Defensive Player of the Year 4 times. They famously beat the Lakers in the 2004 finals 4-1. And if you're interested as to why the super team Lakers lost and why their starting five was not nearly as good as it seemed on paper, I have made a whole video on that, so you can check that out afterwards. Moving on to number 8, the 1990 Pistons. Isaiah Thomas, obviously the leader of the team. Alongside him is Joe Dumars, who I don't think gets enough credit for how good a player he was. A great shooter, great defender, and busted his ass all those years, keeping Michael Jordan in check. In the front court was Bill Laimbeer and James Edwards. Laimbeer, despite how dirty and physical he was on defense, actually happened to be the best three-point shooter on the team. At small forward, the Pistons sometimes started Dennis Rodman, who provided more defense and rebounding, or Mark Aguirre, who provided more offense. Regardless of whoever was the fifth man, this starting five is one of the greatest of all time in both productivity and uniqueness. At number 7, the 2015 Detroit Pistons. Often overlooked, this 32-win Pistons team actually featured the greatest front courts of all time. Josh Smith, Greg Monroe, and Andre Drummond. None of them could shoot for shit. I'm just fucking around. Let's move on to the actual number 7, which is the 2013 Miami Heat. LeBron James, one of the greatest MVP seasons of all time with unparalleled efficiency across the board. Dwayne Wade, who could still put up 20 points any given night. Chris Bosh, always underappreciated for how important he was to that Miami team. Mario Chalmers, who was really the perfect complement to LeBron and Wade, a point guard who didn't need the ball and just played defense and shot threes. And then you have Shane Battier, again, same thing, 3-and-D guy, and one of the best in history at that. The 2013 Miami Heat also had Ray Allen on their team, who often played crunch time minutes, who would prove to come in handy a couple of times. maybe just a couple of times. This team, specifically this lineup with LeBron at the 4 and Bosh at the 5, was a key factor in shifting the way NBA teams viewed basketball, proving that a smaller lineup could indeed win at the highest level. At number 6, the 1995 Orlando Magic. This team is usually mentioned as one of the greatest teams that never won the championship, but I think it also deserves mention here. In the backcourt, you had Dennis Scott and Nick Anderson, both of them snipers from three-point range, in an era where not many people shot the three ball as well as they did. A perfect complement to Shaq, who was only 22 years old but already unstoppable, to the point where refs already had to referee him differently than other players. Alongside him was Horace Grant, already a 3-time champion, as the third option to MJ and Pippen, and of course the point forward, a true unicorn of his time, Penny Hardaway. This lineup was the perfect combination of inside and outside, although it did lose in the finals to the Houston Rockets. And by the way, the Houston Rockets didn't have all that special of a starting five, they just had one very special man named Hakeem Olajuwon, who dominated the series in a way which we haven't quite seen a player dominate in the finals since then. At number 5, the 1963 Boston Celtics. All 5 of the players in their starting lineup were Hall of Famers, and in 1963, all 5 of them were under the age of 30, so still in their prime. Bob Cousy and John Havlicek in the backcourt, Sam Jones at the 3, Tommy Heinsohn at the 4. You might recognize Tommy as the very unbiased commentator during Boston's home games. That was sarcasm, in case you didn't catch it. Tommy Heinsohn is so biased towards the Celtics as a commentator that it's actually kind of adorable because he's really old. So whenever you watch a Celtics home game and you're listening to the commentating, it's basically just an old guy complaining every time, anytime a call goes against Boston. And then of course, to round it all out, Bill Russell, who might be the greatest player of all time, definitely the epitome of a leader, of a truly unselfish player, and it's unfortunate that they didn't even track blocks during his time, or else that would have been a ridiculous stat for him. The 63 Celtics were part of the greatest dynasty in NBA history, but they won also because they consistently had a great bench. In 1963, they had Tom Sanders, Casey Jones, and Frank Ramsey come off the bench, all 3 of which were also Hall of Famers. And of course, this was the 60s. There was only, 12 teams in the NBA at that time. So this, along with the fact that the NBA was just so different back then, makes it so that I actually have 4 starting lineups ahead of the 63 Celtics. And at number 4, we have the 1996 Chicago Bulls. This is the famous 72-win Chicago Bulls team. Not much context here is needed. You're probably familiar with the players. Michael Jordan is coming back from playing baseball with a chip on his shoulder to avenge the previous year's playoff loss to the 95 Magic. He had the greatest sidekick of all time, Scottie Pippen, coming off of 2 seasons where Scottie Pippen himself had to act as the number 1 option in MJ's absence and did a lot better than anyone expected. And then Dennis Rodman, I think without question the greatest rebounder of all time, also one of the best defenders of all time. Ron Harper, who played great defense and as a savvy veteran knew exactly what to do when Jordan was double teamed. And finally, Luke Longley, who did his job and nothing more to round it all out. 1996 was the best version of the Bulls' 90s dynasty. At number 3, the 1988 Los Angeles Lakers. This was towards the end of the Showtime Lakers dynasty. You had Magic Johnson, 28 years old, leading the way, Byron Scott, his backcourt mate who actually led the team in scoring, James Worthy, the Swiss Army knife, AC Green there to rebound and play defense, and then a 40-year-old Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And yes, he was old, and yes, his defense had declined, but he was by no means washed up. This lineup was so good in part because these guys had great chemistry. They had played together at this point for 4 years already. Magic, Kareem, and James Worthy in particular at this point had been together for like 7 years. 1988 would also be the last championship of the Showtime Lakers dynasty. At number 2, the 1986 Celtics. This Celtics team won 67 games led by Larry Bird in his prime, who put up a LeBron-like stat line with essentially 50-40-90 shooting. A player who honed his offensive skills and creativity at a level I'm not sure anyone else in history had. Kevin McHale, unguardable in the post. You ask any center or power forward who played in the 80s, like 8 out of 10 of them say that McHale was the hardest player they've ever had to guard. And then Robert Parrish alongside him, the NBA Iron Man, steady and reliable. In the backcourt, Danny Ainge, who had developed into a quality starter and whose shooting from 3 and from mid-range was much needed on this team. And then Dennis Johnson, one of the most underrated players in the 80s. All 5 guys were between the ages of 26 and 32 in their primes. This is a starting 5 where every guy in the lineup was difficult to replace, and they worked so well together. 3 of the 5 guys averaged more than 5 assists per game. They could score inside or outside. They had their closer for big games. They were the best rebounding team in the league, and they had the best defense in the league. And then, what you've been waiting for at number 1, yes, the 2019 Golden State Warriors. Now, if you didn't see this one coming, I don't entirely blame you, because it might seem a little bit ridiculous to put a lineup on this list that hasn't even seen the court yet. After all, Cousins is still injured at this moment, but the truth is, even if Cousins comes back and he just sucks, even if he's just a glorified Zaza Pachulia, this is still the best starting 5 of all time. Let's break this down. You have 2 superstars who've both won MVP. Both are still in their primes. No other team on this list can claim to have that. You got 4 All-Stars, and that's only if Cousins comes back completely broken, because otherwise you got 5 All-Stars. DeMarcus Cousins before the injury was arguably the best center in the league. He could come back at 75% of what he used to be, and that's still close to All-Star level production. But again, removing him from the equation, we've seen how disgusting Steph, Clay, KD, and Dre are when they're on the court together. It almost doesn't matter who the 5th guy is. At this point, the chemistry is perfect. There's no wasted movement. They have the 2 best shooters in NBA history. They have one of the best isolation scorers, one of the best scorers period in NBA history. Draymond Green, while I stand by the statement that as a player in general, Draymond Green is overrated, as a player on the Warriors, Draymond Green is as good as advertised because he fits so perfectly alongside the other 3 guys. And wait, did I mention that the 5th guy on the team might also be the best center in the league? Look, here's the deal, all right? Here's the deal. They don't even need Cousins to be good. The only thing preventing the Warriors from winning the championship is if one of Steph or KD gets injured. Even if Clay or Draymond gets injured, I still think they're the favorites. That's just how good they are, and that's just how good this starting 5 is. So I got no problem ranking them as the best starting 5 in NBA history. So that was my ranking. Now, before you go, I want to tell you about Squarespace, the sponsor of this video. So Squarespace is essentially the all-in-one toolbox or toolkit that you need to build a professional looking website. And it's especially good for people like me who've never learned how to build websites, who don't know any coding, HTML. Squarespace basically takes care of all the complicated and boring stuff that involves making a website and just allows you to design. I've been using Squarespace for over 2 years to build 2 different websites. And the good thing about Squarespace is that they really offer you a lot of options. Like if you want to build a blog, you can have it look exactly like what a blog you see online looks like. Or if you want it to be like an online portfolio, you can have a landing page, you can customize that landing page. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can go to squarespace.com right now and get a free trial. And then when you're ready to launch your website or you want to purchase a domain through Squarespace, you can use my promo code MDJ for 10% off your first purchase. All right, but that's it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. If you're interested in Squarespace, go check that out. Otherwise, I'd love to know what you think about the ranking in the list in general. If you thought that a team should be higher, if you thought that a team should be lower, let me know down in the comment section below. You can always follow me on my social media and hit me up there anytime you want. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.